Let's shoot for reforming where the unions are led from the bottom up to make it where they have to listen and address their own rank and file membership and to ascertain what are the important issues for them.
We've got a group of three members of Railroad Workers United. Railroad Workers United is a cross-craft caucus of union railroad workers. Hugh Sawyer began his 37th year at Norfolk Southern this year as a locomotive engineer, member of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, BLET, an affiliate of the Teamsters, Division 316. Mark Burrows has served as organizer and co-chair for Railroad Workers United and retired at the end of 2015 after being a SMART TD Local 1433 member, still a member. And Ron Kamenko, a railroad retiree, honorary membership in BLET Division number 51. Ron, Mark, Hugh, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, Jacob.
Absolutely.
Yep, thanks for having us.
Always great to be here, Jake.
Great to have y'all. We wanted to talk to you about two things, and those, and that's the state of rail bargaining and Donald Trump's appointee to the Federal Railroad Administration. So let's start with the state of rail bargaining, and I'll go to Burrows for this first. Explain to us what is going on. Why are both rail labor and rail management bargaining in such a piecemeal fashion?
Well, I can't speak for official rail labor. I can just offer my personal opinions and educated speculation. But with that qualification, I started railroading in 74, and I started paying at 18, and I started paying attention in 79. And I have to say, this is the most convoluted, dysfunctional, negotiating debacle situation I have ever seen. Nothing even comes close. In the last round of national bargaining in 2022, we came fairly close to what has been one of the foundations of Railroad Workers United, of one united bargaining coalition, where there are now 12 different unions, and the carriers have always effortlessly played divide and conquer. But this is just divide and conquer on steroids, exponentially multiplied. It's over the top, and the only trying to give it any rationalization could possibly be that the union leadership just didn't want to even deal with any hedging their bets against a Trump administration. And it is certainly ideal for the carriers. We're now in a situation where just individual agreements on every railroad, terminal by terminal, it's really scandalous from a standpoint of where rail labor needs to go. This is 180 degrees in the opposite direction, and I'll just leave it there for now.
And so what is going on, just to kind of make it explicit for people, is that they're like, each rail union only represents a certain part of the workforce, right? And so they only represent trainmen, or they only represent engineers, or they only represent conductors, or blah 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 blah, right? And so in the past, and you know, during and in the run up to this this round of negotiations, Railroad Workers United was pushing for unity from rail labor to try to, you know, to basically not bargain in this piecemeal way. And so you're having these units that represent some couple hundred, 1,000, 2,000 people negotiating contracts outside of everybody else, and they're just doing it one after another. And so I'm curious, Ron, has RWU been able to analyze these contracts in any sort of systematic way? I know that you're keeping track of like which ones are being negotiated and have they been voted and approved, et cetera, et cetera. But have you been able to analyze like and come to any conclusions about their quality? Like, are these contracts, despite the fact that they're piecemeal, are they good? Are they good contracts? What's the quality of these contracts? I think you're muted, Ron.
It looks like he's frozen as well.
Looks like it. Maybe Hugh, maybe you can help us out.
Well, I want to just say that Ron is on a Amtrak train and may not have a good signal at all times. We're in disarray. I'm just going to build on what Mark said. The carriers were smart. They came out and went on individual properties and the individual unions and laid out a tentative agreement favorable to them, and just to see who would bite at it. And unfortunately, while the RWU pushes for coordinated bargaining on the union side, get all the rail unions working as a team, they immediately splintered and reacted as individual unions. So the carriers have effectively done away with coordinated bargaining from the union aspect of from rail labor, and that's the end of that. And now some tentative agreements, and I haven't seen anything that makes me excited. I want you to keep in mind that the 2022 agreement that was forced on us through a PEB board did not address any issues really, other than wages maybe, that are issues out here, which have to do with work lifestyle issues and insurance and so on and so forth, better insurance or cheaper insurance, I should say. And so we got a pay increase, and that maybe brought us up to where we sort of ought to be. But beyond that, we've made no progress on any other issue, and now we're not going to make progress again. From what I've seen out of the tentative agreements, you're looking at a 3.5% wage increase, these sort of things. That's not, that doesn't get it. There's been a decrease in the health and welfare cut that we pay, a slight decrease. And but again, I got to say this, I speak only as an individual. I'm not speaking for unions, carriers, anybody. I want to make that clear. This is just me personally. But the BLE, I think, has agreed to go to national negotiation, and we don't know where they're at because they're not telling us. Everything's done in secret, which is another principle of RWU, is that we want these negotiations out in the open, and we want the membership involved, the rank and file, and it's not happening. And meanwhile, some unions have come to tentative agreements, and those will probably, whether we like it or not, become a pattern for the rest of us. And it's very frustrating. And Mark really hit it on the nail as far as the disarray and what have you. And it's just sad. And now we're coming into a Donald Trump era with Republicans running everything. Who knows what the heck's going to happen?
Right. Yeah, Ron?
Yeah, as you said, I'm riding on the train here, so if I lose the signal, just bear with me. I'll do my best. I want to add a few things. In effect, there was a bit of a conspiracy in the union and the carrier. In 2022, the union leadership.
Ron, why don't you go off video, and maybe that'll help. Turn your video off, and maybe that'll help with the resolution. We're having trouble hearing you, and so I'll give it back to you.
Good idea. Let me know if that's any better.
That's better, yeah.
Okay, yeah, just interrupt me if it's not working. So in 2022, the rail carriers were largely impotent I'm sorry, the rail union leadership was pretty impotent and basically submitted to the presidential emergency board recommendations and didn't really lift a finger to do what the rank and file was demanding they do. And this was, we believe, upwards of 90% of the rank and file of all the different craft unions wanted action and were ready to strike to get some kind of paid leave time and better situation, work and rest. And the union leadership could not lift a finger. Behind the scenes, it appeared that they really wanted a yes vote on this contract, put the whole thing behind them. The carriers, the last thing they wanted was to be exposed. And what Railroad Workers United was able to do in this vacuum, where it was coming to national headline news, was to not just talk about sick time and the idea of paid leave. We talked about everything. We talked about the rail carriers' excessive buybacks of their own stock, their excessive profits, the massive job cuts, the terrible service that every major shipping group in this country was experiencing, the screwing of Amtrak and Amtrak's ability to put on new frequencies and new routes, let alone run their own existing trains on time. And we gave the rail industry a huge black eye, and the last thing they wanted was to go through that again. So they had a real keen interest, I believe, in settling early and quick. By the same token, the union leadership appeared completely worthless in front of their membership with their inability to lead the fight in 2022. And so the two sides had a mutual interest, I believe, in settling quick, getting this over with at all costs. And it's a real tragedy, I think, for railroad workers, because now we're going back into the Stone Age where every union is bargaining individually, and it sets a horrible precedent going forward that I think in the next round, we're really going to take it on the chin because we're going to be in such disarray. So it's really sad to see what appeared to be a trajectory towards more and more coordination amongst the different unions in bargaining. And now we're back to just plain old square one. It's a bit of a disaster, I think, for the future of rail labor.
Hey, 5 seconds, just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
Right, Mark, we'll go to you, and I'm curious if you think while you make your responses to the continuing conversation, I'm curious if you think there's any hope of kind of scrounging together a coordinated front for the remainder of contracts to be negotiated. I think at this point, 50% of union railroaders are under a ratified agreement or something approaching 50%, but that does still leave 30, 40%, and that's not something to turn your nose up at. Is there any hope of the remaining coming together and scrounging together a kind of a coalition of rail unions, or have all of the unions just kind of shifted your approach to like, this is the way that it's going to be? We need to do the best that we can within our own unions, Mark.
Before I answer that, I just want to backtrack real quickly, and just for clarification, negotiating union by unions, as you were explaining, and we should have clarified it better. Yes, all the different crafts are the carmen are in this union, and the maintenance of way track workers are in this union, so it's always been a historical problem, and that's one of the basic reasons for the essence of the existence of Railroad Workers United, to turn that around. So what always happens is one union settles a sweetheart deal, then that becomes the precedent for virtually the rest of the industry. What's different this time is whereas there used to be something resembling a partial national coalition of bargaining, and that is what has now been eviscerated, in addition to what has always been a historical practice of negotiating union by union. So just for clarification there. As to answer your question, I wish and I hope, but right now, I'm not seeing any kind of attempt to organize resistance. Now, maybe it's always possible and not out of the realm of possibility that if some of these, like you mentioned, perhaps about 40% of the workforce has not yet entered into these tentative agreements and or ratified, and maybe once Trump takes over and rail workers see for their own eyes where this is headed, maybe that could spur some resistance. But my personal opinion is, I think one of the reasons we're in the situation we're at, how we've gotten here, is there's been a demoralization. You can't fight City Hall, and then with the kind of leadership from the established unions, just validates and confirms that. And so it would take an enormous amount of intestinal fortitude or what, for workers to and especially after the patterns have already been set. Any veteran rail workers know that once precedents have been set, you try to defy, you're just going to go, you'll go to arbitration. We had a situation recently on the Burlington Northern, or at least a part of it, where the workers rejected the contract. It went to arbitration, and the arbitrator not only imposed the contract, actually made the terms worse as a way of punishing them for rejecting the original tentative agreement. And so whether it's rail workers rarely, if ever, get a good deal in arbitration, much less a presidential emergency board. And so we hope to reach out. Hopefully these disgruntled workers will realize that we've got to get together and resist, and we try to be the mothership for that resistance that needs to happen, and in our opinion is inevitable, but just when and what's it going to take. So I hope that kind of answered the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And Hugh, as we wrap up the conversation about the contracts, what would your advice be to unionists who work on the rails and want to see their union, and ideally, like Mark said, the rest of the unions to come together and get something better for the remainder of these contract negotiations? Unfortunately, it does seem like we're kind of winding down on this round, and so the focus needs to be on 5 years from now. What can we do to prepare for the next 5 years? So Hugh, what would your advice be for folks to kind of get the best that they can out of this round, but then also, prepare for the fight 5 years from now?
Well, let's address preparing for the fight 5 years from now, because it's really too late on this agreement, in my opinion, or this round. You have 12 different rail unions. Many of them just have a few members, and the Boilermakers, how many people are in that, for instance? So let's shoot for reforming these 12 individual unions into a situation where you have one man, one vote, where the unions are led from the bottom up, and which they're not now, and work on the constitutions and what bylaws to make it where they have to listen and address the rank and file, their own rank and file membership, and to ascertain what are the important issues for them. And then they need to commit, the same group of people, as you put them into office, have to commit to certain ideals, one of which would be coordinated bargaining by the rail unions, in which, by the way, they all bargain, because as long as we stand together, we'll get a good agreement for everybody. And but that needs to hold true all the way through the process, including when we go to a PEB board and what have you. And don't, in other words, you don't turn the individual unions loose until the bidder, well, never. They all vote on an agreement that benefits everybody.
Right. All right. Well, that sounds like great advice to me, Hugh. And I'm sure that if they joined Railroad Workers United, you'd be able to help them out with that. So find Railroad Workers United online and get plugged into them. As we're wrapping up here, I mentioned that Donald Trump had just announced his appointee for the Federal Railroad Administration.
You got somebody interfering with your broadcast at the moment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
I can, but there is still something going in the background. Somebody's on this call and has some sort of background going on.
I think what happened was the intro music played again on the Zoom end, so I was hearing that as well. But I don't hear it anymore. Hopefully, it's
okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Good deal. Good deal. Sorry, sometimes that happens, and I'm not totally sure why. But so Donald Trump appointed David Fink to be, that's his nominee for the Federal Railroad Administration. As we're rounding out, I guess, Mark, do you have any thoughts on Fink as a potential lead for the FRA? Like, what are you expecting from this guy?
Well, the guy was an executive with the. I guess Pan American Railways, which was which was formerly the Guilford Railways. It's one of the most prominent short line railroads, and short lines. Short lines end up where the bigger railroads sell off some of their less profitable sections, and then another entity buys them. They try to pass it off as ma and pa starters, but it's usually different gangs of investors. This was partnered up with one of the Mellon heirs that developed Guilford Railroad, and there was actually a big strike back, I think, in the mid '80s, if I'm not mistaken. But so short lines have always been the laboratory. They're subject to much less stringent regulations. There's a whole different bar. You got Class 1 railroads, which are the major, and they have one set of rules and regulations, and then there's Class 2 and Class 3 have a much lower bar, and they've historically been the laboratory where they experiment with work rule changes, and I'm sure the first remote control were experimented on short lines. I worked on a short line back in the mid '80s for a couple of years when I was between my two main jobs, and we were doing engineer only with a roving road conductor driving in the truck back in 1987. So this is an example of, this is what they're going for now. And so this is just an example of short lines have been the laboratory. So it seems to be this pick is in line with generally Trump's other picks, which is, you want to destroy public education, then put the person in that position, et cetera, et cetera. I expect, my personal opinion, I haven't seen too much of what he has said his intentions, but one thing that is definitely posed, Buttigieg put. They finally came out with a federal mandate on two-person crews, which was very weak, had a bazillion loopholes that you could drive a 3-mile train through, but at least it was something, and it was enough that the carriers have challenged it and gone to court over it and everything like that. I'm guessing this new guy could just undo that with the stroke of a pen. Maybe might take a few strokes of a pen and a few shuffles of paper, but I'm quite sure that it's going to go back to self-regulation on steroids. That's just my personal opinion and observation.
Gotcha. Ron, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, my train has stopped at a station, so hopefully if I got a signal now, it'll maintain for the next minute or two. So in Trump's first round, he appointed a man named Ron Batori to the head of the FRA. And Ron Batori was a lifelong CEO of railroads. This guy has been a lifelong CEO of various things, including he was at General Motors, I believe, for a while. And then Fink, as Mark said, was at the Guilford, the Pan Am, formerly Guilford, which took on the unions in a big way, and there was a big strike at Guilford. Interestingly, his father was the CEO of Guilford at that time. So it's a bit of a dynasty here with a father-son kind of running the railroad. That always kind of strikes me the wrong way and makes me fairly cynical when you have that kind of a situation. But we don't know enough about this gentleman to really make a hard and fast opinion. But like Mark says, I think we can expect the worst. Like his predecessor under Trump, Ron Batori, he is a railroad CEO type. He will talk about safety, as all CEOs in rail do. But really what that means is behavior-based safety, blaming workers why there's accidents, injuries, and fatalities, and not alleviating hazards. Ron Batori, his predecessor, said there's no evidence to show that single person crews, or for that matter, zero person. Batori said nothing about the excessively long and heavy trains. He doesn't believe that they're any more dangerous or inefficient than shorter trains. Ron Batori during the pandemic every way to defer or rather abridge numerous safety rules, knew that waiver every 90 days religiously for the carriers. Anytime their carriers basically would request anything. So it's just speculation, but the similarities are there. We, this individual, will behave in a very similar manner, particularly carry water for the Class 1s, the American Association of Railroads, and the Short Line Association, and all of the industry mouthpieces. It's unfortunate. It's not going to be a very good next 4 years for rail labor under the FRA.
Right. Ron, Hugh, Mark, really appreciate your time. Thank you for talking to us here on the Valley Labor Report.
Thanks again for having us.
Yep. Thanks, Greg.
Yep. All right, folks. Like I said, we've been talking to some folks from Railroad Workers United. They are a cross-craft caucus of union railroaders within the various rail unions. They mentioned there are 12. So if you want more information on them, you can find them online. Google Railroad Workers United. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project. And you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.